like to ask all who are able to please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to welcome all to this evening's regular meeting of the Lakeview Public Schools Board of Education today, June 20, 2023 at 7:30 p.m. at the boardroom at the Weed Educational Campus. I'd like to call the attention of the board. Item B, the minutes of the budget hearing, June 6, 2023.
Move for approval.
Support.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Bear, support by Mr. Miners. Discussion on the motion. Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Item C, the minutes of the regular meeting of June 6, 2023.
Move for approval.
Support.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Bear, support by Mr. Asia. Discussion on the motion. Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Madam Secretary, have we any public communication this evening?
I do not.
Board of Education and Administration comments. Any comments from the board this evening? Is there any timeline as far as, notwithstanding the roofs that the buildings being replaced, such as Ardmore, in getting those places cleaned up better?
As far as Ardmore, you're talking about the exterior?
Yes.
So we aren't doing any restoration on the Louise and Greater Mac corner until we're done with the roof, because they're going to be driving Skytrax, and it just would be throwing money after money. So that fence is staying up because they'll be doing some staging on that side when the roof's starting to be done. So that process is going to be probably 15 days from the start, probably be end of the month after the 4th when they actually start doing some work. So close to the beginning of August is when we'll probably see some of that fencing come down, the restoration work start. And that restoration work is part of our site work contractors on that property. So once they would come in and do all that restoration, then it would be on us if we tore it up with another contractor. So that's why it's being, but we have Landscape Services who's going to start, now that most of the construction materials are removed from there, they're going to come in and start knocking weed whacking a little bit more now that they can get to some of those spaces, cutting the grass, taking care of it, the stuff that's right along the fence line. And then, so we've already engaged them in making sure that that's going to be addressed properly.
Okay. And then also there's some concrete work, sidewalks coming off of Louise towards the building that was taken out. Is that going to be replaced?
Yep. Yeah.
Before sod and all that is
Yep,
finished?
that's all part of the restoration work.
Okay. All right, cool. Any other comments?
I'm excited because my son's going to be going to Ardmore next year, my old alma mater.
Alma mater.
We'll get it done.
Nice. Administration.
Yes, I just offer thank you to our leadership team, our staff, and our families for making 22-23 a more positive, productive year for students. Special thanks to many of our teachers and administrators who adjusted again after, post-COVID, and tried to bring back some normalcy for students and our school climate and cultures. Really, even more special thanks to our leadership team who continue to focus on making improvements and bringing Lakeview, really making this a destination district for families and staff. On a larger scale, I guess, the state legislature and governor are continuing to pass legislation that impacts schools, and they've started getting into the details on the state budget. And of course, pork projects have started to appear in the language. Unique, special little things for unique, special little, areas of the state, probably related to votes in some fashion or another. So get informed and share your opinions on that with our state leadership. And just, to close out the dialogue earlier about bond work, we have work that's, concluding at 2 elementaries, in process at 2 elementaries, just started at the high school this Monday. And thanks to the voters for the work that was, that's going to get done and will still be done and already done, because that's going to make safer, more productive learning environments for students for many years to come. So I'll leave it at that.
So I too would also like to thank our staff for just such a hardworking year. We've come to summer, but you wouldn't know it around here. We have lots of activity that is happening. We're gearing up, getting ready for summer school. Both we have some summer programs for elementary running at elementary level, and we have secondary summer school that will start right after the July 4th at the high school for both middle school and high school. So all of that registration is out there online, and families have been notified if their student needs to recover credit. But we also have lots of training that's happening this summer. All of our areas are scheduling training, and I'm always amazed that our staff hasn't even taken a breath yet, and they're already signing up for lots of summer training so that they can come back and be even more impactful for students. So I thank all of them. We are in the full-blown throes of enrollment, so we do have our open window for schools of choice, but also for our resident families to be enrolling. They're coming in very quickly, and I am placing students as they complete registration packets. So the faster folks do that, they will get a preliminary placement at a building. As many people are aware, we do have lottery for many of our grade levels, unlimited at kindergarten, 6th grade, and 9th grade. The other grades have limits, and those families, when it comes to the end of the window, we will do a lottery draw if we have to. But families are getting preliminary building placements until then, so that they at least can go to building tours and get a feel for where they would be if they're lucky enough to be drawn. So send folks our way. We're happy to have them. As Mr. Paulson said, we are a destination district, and the things that we have to offer families and kids, I will say by far, you can't get other places, and I choose that for my own kids because I believe so much that is true.
Any other comments? Okay, thank you. Item F, retiree recognition.
During the 22-23 school year, the following staff members have processed their retirement. This evening is an opportunity to present them with a token of appreciation for the many years of service they have given to Lakeview Public Schools. We have 3 individuals that we're recognizing tonight. Unfortunately, only one of them is able to be here, but I am going to do the recognition for all of them. As you know, some of them are watching from home, and it is taped, so they'll be able to go back and watch that later. I'm going to start with Janine Rayoum. She's here this evening. And Janine, if you wouldn't mind coming up while I say a few things about you. Janine is an elementary specials teacher that she has worked at the elementary level. She's been at the middle school doing music classes and choir and music appreciation. By the time Janine began her professional relationship with Lakeview Public Schools in August of 2013, she already had an extensive list of qualifications and accomplishments in regards to music education dating back to 1989. Ms. Rayoum brought nearly 24 years of experience to the district when she was hired as elementary and middle school music specials. As music specials teacher, she has worked with various grade levels and has had an impact on each elementary building. The relationships she builds with these young students and the foundational skills she provided would only be further built upon as they made their way to her classes at Jefferson Middle School. Janine's passion for music education often extended beyond the classroom. Over her years of teaching, she has taken on additional responsibilities such as elementary band and vocal music director, as well as Jefferson Middle School vocal music director. She has successfully directed multiple concerts, which have been praised by staff, students, parents, and the community. After 10 years of district service, we are saddened to see Ms. Rayum go. While her absence will be greatly felt throughout our buildings, we are confident that the impact she has had on our students and Lakeview's musical programs will continue on. As Janine moves on to a new journey, we thank her for her hard work and dedication and wish her both satisfaction and happiness in a job well done. Congratulations. Yes. I like it.
No drum buckets tonight?
Yeah.
Congratulations on your retirement.
Also retiring this year is Marty Talaco, Jefferson Middle School teacher. Marty began his professional relationship with Lakeview Public Schools as an elementary teacher at Greenwood Elementary School in 1992. Not long into his teaching career, Mr. Talaco gained popularity with staff, administrators, and parents, all who regularly praised him in letters to his supervisors. Teaching various age groups and grade levels at both Greenwood Elementary and Harmon Elementary, Marty began to apply his skills and knowledge to secondary education. Since 2008, Mr. Talaco has been making an ongoing positive impact on students at Jefferson Middle School, teaching science, social studies, and reading. Marty's dedication to the students at Lakeview Public Schools extended beyond the classroom, and throughout his tenure, he played a role in a variety of curriculum committees. His passion and dedication to students was clearly demonstrated through the ideals and input he provided, ultimately creating positive enhancements to Lakeview's programs. Marty has also shown dedication to the support of new educators. He has participated in interviewing and mentoring educators within our district. Sharing his knowledge and expertise, Mr. Talaco has ensured his influence will go on, even in his absence. This evening, we celebrate Marty's completion of over 30 years of ongoing service to Lakeview Public Schools. He will be deeply missed by administrators, staff, students, and families. We thank him sincerely for the many ways he has benefited Lakeview's elementary and secondary programs and wish him well as he moves into the next chapter of his life. And last, but certainly not least, this evening, we'd also like to recognize Heather Huber, Assistant Principal at Lakeview High School. Heather joined Lakeview High School administrative team in September of 2005 as Assistant Principal. Drawing on her educational and administrative leadership background as a former English teacher and athletic director, Heather had extensive knowledge and expertise that have been an asset to Lakeview Public Schools. Her administrative skills have supported effective and efficient processes, and her relationship skills have helped to build a sense of camaraderie with the team. These same skills were used in her leadership of the Huskies with Heart program, in which she served the community of St. Clair Shores, along with many Lakeview staff and students. Heather is well known for her involvement in the development of staff and improvement of the district. Apart from her normal responsibilities, she has participated in multiple interviews for all union groups. Ms. Huber's insight ensured we are not only hired the best and the brightest educators, but also dedicated and experienced support staff. As a member of the District School Improvement Committee, she was constantly looking for ways that Lakeview could better support their staff and students in order to reach district goals. Heather has also served on various curriculum committees and in more recent years has chaired the K-12 English Language Arts Committee. The improvements and enhancements to these programs have been priceless. Now completing 18 years as assistant principal, Heather will be heading down a new path. We congratulate her on her many accomplishments and celebrate her many years of service.
great. Once again, congratulations to all of our retirees this evening. May they have a great retirement away from Lakeview. Going on with item G, educational goals, end-of-year report.
In the fall of 2021, the state legislature and governor's school aid budget included a requirement for schools to adopt educational goals, implement a K through 8th grade benchmark assessment, and report on the progress of student achievement as it relates to the goals and chosen assessment. Lakeview schools have had the school improvement goals and utilized the NWA assessment tool for many years prior to 2021. We have utilized the data from this tool along with many other data points to assist staff in evaluating student progress. Tonight, Mrs. Woods has prepared a summary of several data points related to NWA and student achievement this year. She will also provide the board a more detailed summary of the background work teachers and administrators engage in to determine interventions and supports that have helped students move forward in the aftermath of COVID. Ms. Woods?
All right, good evening. Devin's going to be my clicker for me.
Your clicker.
My clicker. So there's kind of two parts to this presentation. Like Mr. Paulson said, we're going to start by just doing a quick overview of our benchmark goals, which is required by the state, like we've done before, but just give a little bit more data. You can go ahead. And then we're going to get into more just an overview of the MTSS process that we have been implementing this year, starting at the elementary and heading into our secondary buildings, and kind of go over those next steps for you. So you've got the packet in front of you. So our benchmark goals that we submitted to the state, we had to do this at the beginning of the year and we reported out to them in February as well. We're simply in reading and ELA in our K-12 buildings. We were going to use NWEA to measure growth, and our goal was that our students were going to grow and hopefully grow more than usual because we're trying to make up for gaps from COVID in the last several years. And also that our 9 through 12 students would also grow, but we were using more local assessments for that. Same goal for math. Basically, we're just trying to get these kids from where they are to where they need to be and provide the supports that they need. So with that, these are just some overviews of our, can you hear me okay? Got my teacher voice? All right. So these are kind of the overviews. So for our math, we exceeded K-5, the projected NWEA growth at all grade levels, which we're pretty proud of. For our middle school, we met growth in 6th grade. We're super close in 7th, and then we exceeded in 8th. And I'll talk a little bit about more kind of why we think some of these things are and what we're going to do about it in a minute here. For reading and ELA, we met growth in kindergarten, exceeded for 2nd, 3rd, and 5th, and we were super close in 4th grade. And then, again, we were kind of all over the place there between nearly met, and exceeded at the middle school level. Overall, our students grew, and they grew a lot. So we have some good takeaways. Obviously, we have much to be proud of in Lakeview. Our students continue to achieve better than a lot of people around us. And our core instruction is working for most of our students. That's why our averages look real good. But we also know that those are district averages. And so while we have lots of kids doing great or excelling even kind of beyond expectations, there are still many students at each grade level who are not where they need to be and really who have gaps that are going to keep them from hitting proficiency if we don't give them extra help. And that was true before the pandemic, and obviously we know that it has been intensified over the last few years. And this isn't a Lakeview thing, this is an everyone thing. So some subgroups, for example, we always look at our subgroups. We know our special education students tend to underperform compared to peers, or students who come from economically disadvantaged homes. So we always look at those different issues to see who we're supporting and how we can better support others. And while we have always had academic gaps and kids who need extra help, like I said before, COVID has intensified this. And when you look at the data, our students in grades 3 through 7 are struggling the most, which makes sense because those kids were in K through 4 during the time when the schools shut down and when everything was disrupted for a couple of years there. So these are children who missed some really important foundational skills in learning. Even when we came back and we had the quarantines, just a lot of interrupted learning. So with that, in order to target students' individual needs and fill these gaps, we need systems to make sure that kids aren't slipping through the cracks, to make sure that we are looking at every kid individually and that we're providing clear, consistent interventions for the kids who need them. And so that is why we're going to talk about MTSS. So MTSS stands for Multi-Tiered Systems of Support. The Michigan Department of Ed defines it as a comprehensive framework, and the idea is that we have research-based strategies, and we are looking at meeting individual needs of kids. So no longer teaching to the middle, but really knowing our kids and knowing what they need. MTSS intentionally interconnects education, health, human services. So the idea is that we're looking at the whole child. We're not just looking at academics, we're looking at social, emotional, behavioral, really working to fill all those needs for kids. So why did we need it? It is required by law. We get funding associated with it through our at-risk funding. But we also know that within any given classroom, students have a ton of individual needs that cannot be met with a one-size-fits-all approach. So because many students have these learning gaps for lots of reasons, some were COVID-related, but some have to do with moving into our district from somewhere else that had different expectations, or attendance issues, or learning differences. And we know that our special education students who have disabilities and therefore qualify for extra services, they were already getting additional help. Our gen ed students who maybe just have learning gaps before MTSS did not get the extra help. And those are the kids that we really try to target through MTSS. So we've been following the 5 essential components from the MDE framework, and the idea is that we're looking to eliminate barriers so that really we know our kids really well, they know what they need, and every student has a chance at success. I'm trying to go through this quickly. So these are the 5 components that MDE requires for a effective MTSS. And so when we set out as a team, Devin and I pulled a team together last summer to start planning. We decided to use the state's framework as our framework, and we would implement with that. So it's team-based leadership, comprehensive screening and assessment, a tiered delivery system, selection, implementation of instruction, interventions, and supports, and then this continuous data-based decision-making. So we're constantly looking at data, seeing if kids are growing, making adjustments, and starting all over again. So our team started last June, working together. The team consisted of all of our elementary principals. We had all of our psychologists, our literacy coaches, math specialists. We had teachers from each building, and then when we added our elementary interventionists this year to the team, they joined this team as well. So we were getting 19, 20 people together making decisions so that we were hearing a lot of voices and making sure that what we were doing made sense in our buildings. It wasn't just people, making decisions from central office. For comprehensive screening and assessment, as Mr. Paulson said, we've always, or not always, but for a very long time used NWEA. But what we did is we have layered in more assessments. A lot of them are very specific to where students are at developmentally, like in our reading programming. Our kindergarten students have very different assessments that we're looking at than our 4th grade students. And we're using these assessments consistently throughout the district 3 times a year. And 3 times a year, we gather all that data and use it to screen students to make sure the whole idea of screening is that nobody falls through the cracks. So we're looking at every single student, who's where they're supposed to be, who's not, and if they're not, where are the gaps and what can you do about it? So that's the next component, this tiered delivery system. So we use that data, and we basically quantify students into one of 3 categories based on their data. So our Tier 1 students are students who, for the most part, are getting what they need from our high-quality core instruction every day in the classroom. What we're doing for all is enough for them. Our Tier 2 students are students who have some gaps. They need extra support maybe to be successful in their grade level classroom instruction, but they're not years behind. Our Tier 3 students typically have serious foundational learning gaps. We're talking about 3rd graders at a kindergarten reading level, for instance. So they require intensive remediation of those missing skills. That's not going to happen in their classroom because their classroom's learning at a 3rd grade level and they need someone to fill in kindergarten and 1st grade holes. So typically, ideally, Tier 3 students are getting extra support in the classroom, but they also then are getting pull-out intervention of some sort to make sure that they're getting intervention at their level. So this is just an example. We did this for every classroom, every grade level, every building 3 times this year, where we pulled all of their data. We have a wonderful MTSS team who hand enters all this into Google Sheets and organizes it and color codes it so that when we sit down and have Our teams come together. It's very clear how our students are doing, which of those tiers they fall under, and it really helps us to know which kids we need to zoom in on and provide extra supports for. So that's kind of the next part is, as a team, we have to select what are the right instructional methods and interventions for the kids who have been identified. So we have benchmark data meetings 3 times a year after those 3 sets of assessments where we bring our building MTSS team together and they meet with every single grade level team. This past year, I met with every team every time. Moving forward, our principals will be taking lead on a lot of that and we'll just be supporting from this building. But we meet with everybody and we look at every kid's data. So we have 1,700 plus kids in our elementary. We've looked at every kid. And we've done that 3 times minimum this year so that we know that the kids who need it are getting the appropriate interventions and supports that they need. So students who are identified as Tier 2, like I said, we talk to the teachers about what are the gaps and what can we do extra in the classroom to give them the additional support that they need. And we know that's tough because we have a lot of kids with a lot of needs right now. And so our teachers are working their tails off to provide this. Then for our students who are identified as Tier 3, the expectation is they're going to get that extra help in the classroom, but then hopefully we have enough intervention staff who are going to pull them out 2 to 4 times a week, depending on availability, to again fill some of those foundational gaps. So we, for example, in one of our buildings had 3 or 4 students who transferred in 5th grade this year, non-readers. Our 5th grade teachers during their 5th grade curriculum can't fill those kinds of holes. So that's when we're pulling them out, literally teaching decoding to 5th graders and then trying to give them support in the classroom to keep them moving at grade level as well. So to add on to that, just to talk a little bit about, we added staff this year, as you know, so those additional staff have helped us to provide these interventions. We added a second math specialist. Previously, we had one who only serviced our 2 Title I buildings, and our 2 non-title buildings didn't have access to that support. So with our second math specialist, they were both split between 2 buildings, so now children in all 4 of our elementaries were able to receive the math intervention they needed. We also added 6 elementary interventionists. When we got very lucky, they were all fantastic. And they were able to work to provide reading intervention. It was about 1.5 per building. We had a couple who were splitting buildings. So with those 8 people total, we were able to provide those Tier 3 interventions to most of our Tier 3 students. We had a little bit more need than we had humans, so we kind of prioritized math in the upper grades, reading in the lower grades. But really trying to make sure that our students with the greatest need were getting the greatest support from people who were very well trained and who we had systematic, evidence-based interventions. We weren't just like throwing flashcards at them and hoping for the best. From there, oh, and we also had some after-school tutoring. Sorry, thanks, Devin. With extra COVID grant money, we've been able to do extra before and after school tutoring for families who are able, and as we've had staff to do that. So that has also helped. So for the continuous database decision-making, I already mentioned 3 times a year we have our benchmark data meetings, but then we don't want to wait 12, 13 weeks in between to see if what we're doing is working. So then every 6 to 8 weeks in between, we had problem-solving team meetings again, building MTSS teams meeting with every grade level teacher team to look at any students who are receiving intervention who are not responding the way we think they should. And if that's the case, then we looked at how to tweak interventions, intensify them, change things up. Are there other things going on? Do we need to have conversations with the parents about attendance or about health issues? So really, again, making sure nobody's fallen through the cracks. And then with our early releases this year, we were able to bring our grade level teams together once a month during those early releases as part of our PLC process to also constantly look at this data and make changes for our kids. So when we talk about tiers, this is the ideal. If your programming is effective and you are doing what kids need, about 80% of your students should be getting what they need from that Tier 1 core instruction. About 15% then would be considered Tier 2 and would just need some extra support in the classroom. And no matter what you do, you're always going to have about 5% who need more targeted instruction for all the reasons we've mentioned. So keep in mind, that's the ideal. We finished our year here for reading at the elementary level. So 68% at Tier 1, about 21% at Tier 2, and 11% at Tier 3. We are not in a bad spot. Obviously, we have work to do, but there are districts around us that are literally the pyramid's upside down. And so we're happy to say that we are on our way. And if you look at that data a little bit more closely, you can see our first and second grade for reading is in a really good spot. We've got some other areas for growth, and this information is really helping us then to make decisions about future programming. I met with the elementary principals yesterday, and we have this data broken down deeper to every grade level at every building, so we were able to have conversations about where do we need support, where do we need instructional resources, so we can be very responsive. Show you the math. So math, we're at about 73% Tier 1, 13 Tier 2, and 10 Tier 3 at the end of the year. And again, that's just the breakdown. And when you look at this, you know, these are percentages, but we have about 1,729 students at the elementary level who were tested. This doesn't include young fives, so this is just kindergarten through 5th grade. So when we say there's 10% of students in math requiring Tier 3 intervention, that's 175 children who need more than they're going to get in the classroom alone. And so that's why being able to add these extra staff has been so powerful. And that's why really rethinking how we are doing instruction in the classroom so that we're supporting the kids who need it with extra supports, but also making way in our schedule to give them extra is so huge. So next steps. So we're looking to implement an additional district-wide assessment tool to help us better progress monitor. There are progress monitoring tools that let us look at children every 2 weeks to know if the things we're doing to support them are helping them to grow, so we can be even more responsive to the kids receiving intervention. We're looking at elementary trimesters for grade reporting. Right now, we have quarters, but all of our assessment procedures are 3 times a year, and so what we're finding is we're over-testing kids. But more importantly, we're getting this information, and then it's 4, 5, 6 weeks until we can sit down with parents and have those face-to-face conversations. And so we want to realign things a little bit so that we can have those immediate conversations with parents, reassure them and show them what we're doing for kids, and really be able to discuss progress with them in a way that lines up much better with our system.
And potentially seek their support in
Correct.
helping at home.
Absolutely. And part of the 3rd grade reading law, even though the retention part has gone away for next year, the 3rd grade reading law is still a requirement, and we have to have those conversations with parents within a certain window. So under our current system, teachers have to have separate conferences before the conferences so that we're meeting state deadlines for those conversations. So we're really trying to line that up and give parents more communication, but also get them more involved in being part of the solution. We're also looking at creating MTSS processes at JMS and LHS. It obviously looks different at the secondary level, but we've already started a great deal of work at the middle school. And we've been talking about kind of how we're going to push the behavior side at both JMS and LHS next year as well. We're also looking at our support classes at the middle and high school because intervention has to look very different. Everything's based on a class-based schedule. And some of them have been there a while, and Devin and I have been looking really closely. Amanda's been involved, just making sure that we are really monitoring the success of those programs, and if that's not what kids need, what can we do to give them more? Because a lot of these kids who were struggling in elementary are now moving on to the middle school with a 2nd grade reading level. What are we doing to support them? And then finally, it's okay, you don't have to go back, just continuing to look at curriculum and instruction through the PLC lens so that we are making sure that we're constantly improving. So finally, we're super excited about this. Next year, we are building on the 2nd layer of MTSS, which is social, emotional, and behavioral supports. And this starts in our early childhood center where we've already got testing and tiering kicked off, but also PBIS. And it goes straight through in a much more systematic way, I'd say, in the elementary and middle school, but we're looking at how to pull the high school in as well. But the idea is we're going to focus on proactive behavior supports. We have a district PBIS committee that's looking at how we are teaching and modeling behaviors. The idea is to bring fewer kids to you guys with discipline problems. So what can we do to build those proactive strategies? So consistent social emotional behavioral instruction, pre-K through 5th grade. We're going to be doing second step in all of our classrooms starting in the fall to make sure that students are in a very consistent way learning how to manage their feelings, how to manage conflict, how to get along, how to make good choices. We've had restorative practices trainings. We've got 60 teachers who signed up this summer to come spend 2 days learning restorative practices, which is super exciting. Be a nice program at the high school in the fall, which is a mental health awareness and support program. We're going to be doing district-wide social emotional screening to identify kids who are at risk for mental health concerns. Continued behavior interventions that we're going to try to set up systematically, more staff training, and then just as a reminder, we've hired additional staff this year. We hired the 2 behavioral mental health support specialists, 1 elementary, 1 secondary, but also additional social workers and a psychologist, so that we have all the right people in place to create these systems and make sure that we're giving kids what they need. Last slide. So we keep our strategic plan at the core of our work, and so through the MTSS process that we've just talked about and just all the work being done to give kids supports, we really feel like we're hitting on a whole lot of our strategic plan, and we're excited to keep doing good things for kids. Any questions? I know I've talked a really long time, sorry. No? All right, thank you.
I will just add the idea of doing what looks like your previous meeting, the budget hearing annually, doing something that's related to instruction and teaching and learning on an annual basis with the board. So, you know, and if we have to follow the timeline that's currently in place, it'll probably be at this time of the year. But if that goes away, as many other things are going away from the past at the legislature, we might move this type of thing back into the fall so that we can include commentary about M-STEP and PSAT and SAT. You get some information about that when we get those results, but usually it's not a, public meeting where we throw that in there too. But just as a, a stand aside.
Yeah, being able to capitalize on what we have as far as data to help us create the path of next steps, that's awesome. This is a good job, thank you.
Thank you.
Robin, Ms. Martin?
Is it a lot more challenging to measure the social emotional behavior support?
So yes and no. We're going to be looking at multiple data sources. So if we have the social emotional screener, which really looks at both internalizing behaviors, students who tend to maybe not act out, but exhibit behaviors that might indicate issues that aren't as obvious, but also externalizing behaviors, which look at behavior and things like that, like what we see. That's part of it. We also will look at Swiss data, our kids who are, frequently getting in trouble. What is the motivation? What are the types of behaviors? We'll also be looking at attendance, home life. So it's quantifiable in maybe less super neat ways, but there are ways to do it and to use data to make sure that, again, we're identifying kids and proactively supporting the behavior and the social emotional concerns.
Any other comments? No? No? Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Moving on to the consent agenda, Michigan Association of School Boards membership.
Membership in the Michigan Association of School Boards is considered annually, and request for approval is being recommended to the board at this time. Total membership fees in 22-23 or 23-24 are $7,941.85, including the legal trust fund annual renewal. 22-23 dues were a little lower, not surprising. So that's our recommendation at this time.
Mr. President, I move that the Board of Education approve payment of the Michigan Association of School Boards dues for the 2023-2024 school year in the amount of $7,941.85.
Support.
Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Taylor, support by Ms. Martin. As this is a consent agenda item, there is no discussion on the motion. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Under general, item A, threat assessment process presentation.
As we open up this section of the meeting, I want to share some positive thanks to the small steering team, Devin DePero, Jason Townsend, and Laura Woods, specifically, who served and guided a larger committee of professional staff in the development of the Lakeview Threat Assessment Protocol and Procedure. The group brought together Lakeview brought together in a practical, usable way, and it relates to school safety and intervening to assess student behavior. Tonight, we have a short presentation on the development, piloting, and refining of the process throughout the year and the tools that will be utilized to intervene with students in crisis. A year ago, we had many administrators, mental health, and other professional staff trained within a county-supported threat assessment model developed and owned by a vendor. The state later supported training school staff with the same model and vendor. Macomb was ahead of the rest of Michigan with respect to this idea. Our team of staff who got trained, approximately 30, immediately saw how impractical the private vendor's model would be for schools. A long, cumbersome process and tool and questionnaire, and in hard copy only. A large committee of Lakeview professionals believed we could do better by streamlining the most critical pieces and transferring the material into a confidential Google document. This would allow approved staff at multiple levels to have a record everyone could access quickly and easily, and it would keep the record live while a student traveled up through the system. I'm proud to share that our team did exactly what they thought they could, and it is working as intended with piloting this year. Now, Director of Curriculum Laura Woods will share a few more thoughts.
Everyone. So, I'm Devin Carroll. Sometimes I didn't know Laura, she just
Talked a lot.
So you guys have a presentation in front of you that has all of the same information we're gonna present, but we really wanted to is that close enough? This one too?
I'll pick you up.
All right, so we wanted to take this time to do a small presentation just to inform you all of what this process looked like, how we got to doing this. Carl gave a really good, pretty quick rundown, actually. We're just going to go a little bit further on some of those details. So when we created this committee came from, we meet 4 times a year as a mental health group that is led by us 3. So this includes all of our building counselors, social workers, special education social workers, school psychologists that are throughout the whole district. So during those meetings, we formed this committee. So this committee really stemmed from a lot of what Carl just said. We had some teachers, we had some staff, we had some administrators go to meetings at the ISD, and we knew that we needed to create something. So we reached out to this group that we are able to work with those 4 times a year, and really had people come to us and say, I want to be a part of this. So these were the awesome team members that met very many times. We actually looked back and over everything, and it took us over 35 hours to develop this whole threat assessment. So this was a lot of time by all of these wonderful professionals, and they really did dedicate all of their knowledge and experiences and expertise to this. So huge shout out to them and all their hard work. So, as Carl stated, several team members and administrators across the district went to the BTAM school training in February, and then we developed that group from our own internal group. And one of the biggest reasons why we wanted to do this was we were kind of provided information, but no clear standpoint on what exactly it should look like. So Lakeview kind of we did our own thing, and we said we're gonna develop our own threat assessment. So that's kind of where we got to where we're at right now as far as training and information regarding the threat assessment process throughout Macomb County. So we kind of worked very thoroughly with this and making sure that we had a proactive way of making sure we're addressing the potential threats, but then we also wanted to make sure that we had a reactive way when it came to the threats that we could be hearing or intervening when we have a student that's in crisis. So it was we really wanted to make sure that we looked at it from both sides. If you guys want to add anything, feel free to hop in. Go ahead.
Doing a great job.
Thanks. So our mission, we kind of worked backwards on our mission. So we knew that we had all of this information that we wanted to create this threat assessment, and it really came from a lot of different spots. We took hours and reviewed multiple different threat assessments from across our county, from across our state, and our whole country. We were looking at some in Florida, we were looking at some in Virginia, and we really wanted to make sure that all of the information we had was based on potential screeners or assessments that were already in place? What was the research behind it? Did we have every little kind of nook and cranny worked out when it came to creating our mission, which was to initiate a process of threat assessment, but also to establish that screener, which we'll talk a little bit more about as we go on, and be able to use it district-wide, so all the way from, pre-K through 12th grade.
And kind of adding on to that, we know that the last few years, as we've seen increased school violence, that school districts get pulled through the ringer when, God forbid, something happens. And so we thought it was really important to have this process also so that we were giving our administrators and mental health workers the tools and the confidence that they needed to know that they weren't going to be out on a ledge like, well, I thought I was doing what was best. We were going to develop a process that was consistent, that was research-based, that we will be training people on. I'll talk about that in a minute, so that everybody kind of had that consistent, I hate to use the word, but cover to say we followed our process if, God forbid, the worst were to happen. So we used the U.S. Secret Service's recommendations for creating a targeted violence intervention plan. It was literally a framework, and that's what our team used to walk us through this process. Members of the team met a total of 17 times between October and April. Like Devin said, 35-ish hours of work when we go back and figure that out. We reviewed various threat assessments, like she said, including some from colleges and some from some different places. You stole my slide there a little bit.
Sorry.
It's okay. We also, go ahead. We also consulted with our district legal team a couple different times to make sure that we were on the right track, that they felt comfortable with our language, that we weren't missing things, because that's not our area of expertise, and we tweaked accordingly. We worked through various drafts. Starting in February, we piloted it 25 times across all levels. So each time we would meet with admin who had used it, or we'd bring our team back together, we would listen to feedback and make tweaks. You want to speak to what it was like using it at all?
Yeah, one of the things I'm proud of, I've been through numerous trainings, and as Mr. Paulson stated, anybody can, or a lot of people can come up with it. The problem is that it's too cumbersome for effective use, and to make sure that it gets consistently used. So one of the things that we were able to develop is a way to consistently use it, and by utilizing the screener, it doesn't make you go into all the hundreds of questions and all the evidence researching and all that. It will, obviously, if the end result of the screener tells you to do that. And so the process is that an administrator and either a social worker or a counselor meet together, and at that point, they go over the screener questions with the students, and then after that, they decide whether or not we move forward as a team. And if we move forward as a team, then we would involve other people.
And that was really important because we knew that if it was too cumbersome, that people may not always do it in those questionable situations, right? And we didn't want people to have to make those calls of, okay, is this worthy of a screener or worthy of a full threat assessment or not? So the beauty of the screener is it's 10 minutes or less. And so what we found, and our elementary principals have used it, middle and high school, is when in doubt, you do the screener, right? And then that's going to help you to make that decision of, nope, this is a third grader shouting, I hate you on the playground, or I want to kill you, versus, oh, there's some other red flags, we need to dig deeper. So we wanted to make sure that we were giving people both of those tools. And to Jason's point, we wanted to make sure that we only went to that big full tool that you were given in the board packet when it was necessary. So we developed criteria for which staff would be involved, at least an administrator and a mental health worker, and then depending on the severity of the situation, we would call in our school liaison officer. For some of our special education students, we would call in caseworkers who know those kids and their behavior needs. So we spelled all of that out. And we were very specific that anyone performing the threat assessment and or screener was going to be trained ahead of time. So this wasn't just some document anybody pulled out and hoped for the best. We're going to make sure that people are trained and know how to use the tool and know what our processes are. So that training is scheduled for August. It'll be a half day. All of our building administrators, counselors, school social workers, psychologists, and then those 2 behavioral and mental health specialists will all be trained, with the idea being that we are ready to roll on this first thing next year with a nice plan. The training will also include this is part that the research shows is one of the most important things, but that schools often leave out. which is after the threat and after the reaction, if the student ends up back in school, as many of them will, depending on the severity of the threat, we need to have a safety plan at the school to make sure that the student who's made a threat, we feel safe having them here. And so there's a lot of research about the importance of that risk management or safety plan. So we're including quite a bit about that in our training because we know that that's one of the most important parts for keeping everyone safe in the aftermath of a threat. Obviously, we're not talking about the super serious ones that keep children out of school, but the in-betweens. We also looked extensively at how we wanted to document, like Mr. Paulson said, we want this to be something that any administrator, any school mental health worker in the district, kid gets to 9th grade, makes a threat, we have one place where everyone can access easily and see, oh, he did this twice at the middle school too. Because we know that it's important to look at those patterns over time. And so being able to be very clear on how we're going to document these things. We talked a lot with our attorneys about what types of documentation should follow the student, what do we share, what do we put in the student records. So we've got a good plan and all of that will be covered in the training. And we created clear, consistent protocols for responding to risk for self-harm.
So the one thing that we really got out of this too was building a consistent message for our families and from our staff. So when we sat down and we talked about what are the resources for students who may exhibit some kind of self-harm, what are the things that we can provide them as resources for their family, for siblings, for them, for really anyone that's affected by that. So we were able to get together from all levels during this process and formulate an actual very, very detailed document about emergency mental health services, what resources look like in Macomb County, who can you call, who can you go to, what are some things that you can use. So all of those things were put into one great resource for our families. Obviously, if there is a self-harm report that is done through the threat assessment, whoever's getting that self-harm is going to make sure that they're reporting it to the family that day and they're calling these families. We're not just saying go look at a website. We're saying these are all the things for you. This is what I can offer you. They're also available here. So that will be available to all families, but especially when we're in a situation that is obviously very delicate, we want to make sure we're supporting our families. The one other thing that I didn't say, you can go to that, that's fine, Michael. The one other thing that I didn't say too that I want to make sure is this doesn't take place of discipline. So this is something that kind of, can run parallel if necessary, but it's something that we are truly looking at whether it's any type of threat that is, it could be suicidal, it could be homicidal, it could be just simply a threat that's just very concerning. So there can be, this doesn't take that away and say, well, we're going to do a threat assessment, there may not or be discipline, because that's not accurate. There very well may be discipline that goes alongside of this. So I just wanted to make sure I pointed that out, and if you guys wanted to add anything.
And to add to that, the threat assessment then helps to inform, though, what was the child's intent. Because a 5th grader, again, a young person making a threat on the playground, in the heat of the moment, we're going to respond very differently, both, in terms of mental health support, but also discipline than a student who we find literally has been threatening or worse, planning to do harm to other people. So really, this allows us to not hold all threats equal and to really spend some time digging into, the motivation behind some of these behaviors so we can respond appropriately.
This is a copy of what the threat assessment looks like. So it is a lot of pages. It's in front of you, yeah. It's a lot of pages, but I think this really challenged Laura's Google skill set. She's amazing in Google, and this is something that really came out of using it as a pilot. We had it in a whole nother program. We were off and running, and we thought, wow, this is really going to be great, and we had a few of our team committee members use it and said, this is not working well. So we went back to the drawing table, and Laura actually converted it all into a Google, which ended up being much more manageable for the people who are actually doing this on a daily basis. So just really taking the feedback from Jason and from the other administrators and the committee members who were doing this, we really got to an end product that is going to be very beneficial for our students, making sure that we have a plan going forward when we do get to the end of these screeners and the threat assessments, but also being able to support our staff and our administrators who are doing the threat assessments themselves.
And if you scroll just a little bit, you'll see the screener is just the first few pages. And so for a student who at the end of the screener we determine doesn't need the full threat assessment, they're done. You're not doing all 15 pages. But part of why we switched, like Devin said, to the Google Doc was because our high school team said we had 3 different people investigating and they couldn't all be in the form at the same time. And so we said, well, we have a solution for that. We need this to be something where multiple people can be in there working on it and collaborating. So if you scroll down to the end, it kind of lays out how at the end we make a determination that it's one of 3 types of threats. This is for when you do go through the full threat assessment.
You can go all the way to the end, yeah.
Yeah, a little
Yeah,
further.
sorry. Thanks, Mike.
There's like a chart, but basically there's 3 types. It's transient, there you go.
There you go.
Serious or very serious. And we respond to each one differently, and we've got, and this, we didn't make all this up. This came from some of the samples we pulled from, like very specific action steps, so that our team knows how we respond very differently to the different types of threats.
And again, just as another little side note, all of this went through our attorneys. So they were able to really look at, once we had made the tweaks, to get, to run it by them one more time to just make sure that we had everything accounted for and we had everything correctly worded and formed, so.
And one-
As much of this is related to mental health, does this also include, just a cursory review of this, does this also include a search of the student's locker and possessions?
I'll let you speak to that.
Yeah, if it's deemed appropriate. So, for example, if it's, if we feel, I would do that if I felt there was any type of credible threat. I would do that even before I did any of that, any of the questions. And then obviously, if I did the questions and then the student answered and I haven't searched a locker, then I would search a locker. So, yes, any type of threat, they still get searched. There's still possible discipline. The biggest thing is if it's, one person just saying that it's another person.
The one that comes to mind is the logical one that in Oxford.
Oxford.
Yeah.
That's the one that comes to mind, and, in my eyes, there are many opinions in this thing, but the ball was dropped.
For sure.
It could have been prevented. Wholeheartedly could have been prevented that day, that time. Not to say it couldn't have happened in the days beyond that.
Our threat assessment would have kept that student from being let out of the office.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean,
One of the
I can't
things-
say anything else, but that's
Yeah, one of the
true.
things that we talked about was to make sure that we included, because from everything I read, it felt like that they were coming at it from a suicide perspective rather than homicidal. And so we include both suicide and homicidal questions to hopefully, gather that information. And then we do, from a mental health perspective also, we have, because nobody's psychic, right? So as a team, we make the best educated decision, and we do have in there, as of this time, on this date, they are deemed whatever the decision
Yeah.
is. So, because we may deem that they're not a threat, all of a sudden they leave, they get pushed in the hallway, something happens,
Right.
and things are different.
And even the 3 levels of what we decide, transient is a kid made a comment in passing, right? They didn't really mean it. But the difference between serious and very serious is we're worried this kid's gonna hurt themselves or others like now. Serious is kind of, given the right circumstances, we're concerned that this kid has the potential. And so you respond to those differently, but you still respond to those through the mental health supports, through all those other pieces, getting our liaison officer involved, all those pieces. And like Jason said, even a trained psychiatrist will only sign off on somebody's mental well-being in that moment, right? So you do the best you can, but part of what we believe will protect our staff is they'll be well-trained, we'll have a clear, consistent procedure, and there will always be a team. It's never one person trying to make a call this important on their own. And I believe that if those pieces had been in place in Oxford, things may have looked different. They didn't have a process, they didn't have a team, they didn't, so.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Anything we can clarify or any other things that might have came up as you looked at the documents? We're here to.
I had a quick, just for those that were at the personnel or the subcommittee meeting for this, we have maybe a bit more perspective on this, but can you just kind of explain how this relates to suspension and expulsion and how it's not directly tied to whether or not a student, or it's recommended that a student be expelled or long-term suspended?
I'll talk a little and then we'll let Jason jump in. I think the biggest thing is that kids make threats, and I think sometimes as an overreaction to what we've seen in schools, we've seen a zero tolerance kind of mentality, which you have to take into consideration the age of the student, the intent behind what was said, those sorts of things. So again, there's a lot of factors that can get considered. If a young student makes the same threat that a ninth grader makes, we're going to respond very differently regardless, obviously. Not that elementary kids can't do harm, and so we still take those seriously. But I think at the very least, this gives us a consistent process across the district to look at those threats and to really look at what was the intent and to kind of know where to go from there. Like Devin said, it doesn't mean they're not going to get discipline, and it doesn't mean that it's not going to be appropriate, because if a student really is a genuine threat or has made continued, we've had a couple students make continued repeated threats, obviously you're going to address those students very differently than a kid who makes a transient threat in the heat of the moment. You want to add on?
I was just going to say, I think it provides you guys more information if it does make it here. The other thing is, sometimes even if it's a transient or not credible, it's created a very, huge disruption to the school environment, where if students are afraid to come to school, we have parents calling because of everything, that it's not just the threat now, it's the huge disruption to the school environment too that plays a role.
And looking at the developmental, what's developmentally appropriate? We know that a sixth grader, they are much more impulsive and unable to see the impact of something stupid they say in the heat of the moment versus a 16-year-old who we're letting drive cars, right? So that's the other piece too, is just being able to really look at all the pieces.
Yeah, I appreciate just this process in general from that perspective of what all of you just said, simply because speaking from a school board perspective, the most difficult part of this position, in my opinion, is the student discipline part. Because, and I've talked about this with a few of my colleagues, like making decisions, just hearing it from you and that's it, and then we have to make a decision and kind of deliver, that's tough. So having a bit more context is very helpful. And, I think that, it's the right thing to do, but it's also just, it provides a larger picture, so.
The more information you have, the better decision.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Does anything need to be changed into our handbook to encompass this? And
The group will be working on that tomorrow, right here in this room.
Yes.
no, you didn't give me any prompts.
No. Yeah, leadership retreat tomorrow. We'll have code of conduct handbook, informational discussion. We have an attorney from our policy group, Miller Johnson, participating with us one of the 2 days. So yeah, we'll have appropriately updated paragraphs where they need to be in reference to the student handbook and code of conduct.
Okay. Any other questions? Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. President, I recommend that
Wait, don't they have to read this whole thing?
Yeah, moving on with the agenda, under general, item B, threat assessment process approval.
Take that.
Usually it's me that's jumping.
Did all the work, you might as well do it. You might as well take it.
Sure, do that.
Want to drink of water first?
Right. Earlier this evening, a few minutes ago, administration shared details about Lakeview's threat assessment process. Our staff utilized research and training provided through a variety of sources over the past 2 years. Information and training from the U.S. Secret Service, Michigan State Police, National Association of School Psychologists, FBI, and several other sources were the foundation of this work. Lakeview's professional staff developed our assessment tool and procedure based upon the recent research, training, and samples provided by those organizations. To avoid duplicity, our modification and enhancements within our tool can address potential threat to self or others. The tools and procedure will only be utilized by appropriate staff who have been trained properly, typically administrators, counselors, social workers, and psychologists. The process is meant to be a team decision with colleagues who work together to evaluate a student. Because this process, tools, and the training will be utilized district-wide, administration believes the board should formally adopt the process and tools. Trained staff have been piloting the tool throughout this year with success. Administration recommends the board approve, as presented, Lakeview's threat assessment process.
Mr. President, I recommend that the Board of Education approve, as presented, the Lakeview Threat Assessment Process as another tool to assist trained professional staff in keeping our schools safe.
Support.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Minor, support by Mr. Bear. I do have one question. Not asking that this person or persons be involved in the discussions tomorrow or moving forward with this thing, but will our local liaison officer be apprised as to the process so that they know?
Absolutely.
Already has been.
Yeah, already has been. We've called Brock in a few times when we have had these going on to help us decide kind of what the next steps need to be. Obviously, always to talk about if we need to have law enforcement involvement based on the threat. And if we ever got to the full threat assessment, he would absolutely, or the person in his role, would absolutely be a part of that process as well.
Awesome. Okay, any other questions? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Well done, thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on with the agenda to personnel. Item 8, changes in personnel at our place is an updated agenda item.
Tonight, administration is bringing forward the following changes in personnel since the last presentation to the Board of Education on June 6, 2023. New hires, Jackie Kokowski, Lakeview Public Schools Technology Specialist, Elizabeth Otto, Jefferson Middle School Teacher, effective August 22nd. Promotion, Michelle Anderson, Lakeview High School Assistant Principal. Resignation, Jacqueline Kalkowski from her paraprofessional role. Schedule B, new coaches and sponsor for 22-23 school year, Heather Pickering, Jefferson Middle School yearbook sponsor. And Alexa Garafola, Lakeview High School softball girls junior varsity coach. Schedule B, returning coaches and sponsors for the 23-24 year as listed, and Schedule B, new coach sponsor for the 23-24 school year, Chris Blair, Lakeview High School volleyball junior varsity coach.
Mr. President, I move that the Board of Education approve the changes in personnel as presented.
Support.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Bear, support by Ms. Martin. Discussion on the motion. Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Item B, exempt central, oh, I'm sorry, we have somebody.
We sure do.
There I go again.
Yeah, that's okay. So I'll have Jackie stand up first. Jackie is definitely not new face around Lakeview. She's had multiple different roles here in Lakeview. The most recent one is as a paraprofessional working in our computer lab at the high school. She's been a frontline first response person for technology repairs and support to those folks in the building. That's the structure we've set up. And she's worked closely with us in the technology department, both during the year, but also in special projects. She's been a trooper on coming over both after school during the year and in summer when we've had large projects. As the board knows, with technology support, we've put lots and lots of stuff in buildings with a very small staff. And the board has supported us adding to that department as we've added lots of technology pieces like Promethean boards and one-to-one. And Jackie is coming aboard as our switching roles and coming aboard as our technology specialist. And our team's thrilled to have her over on a full-time basis starting after the 4th of July break. So welcome and congratulations. And next is Michelle. Michelle Anderson's here. Michelle has been a face that's been around the district at all of the buildings. We technically hired her as a split dean of students for special ed related at Harmon and at Princeton, but she quickly morphed out of that as the needs in the student services department grew, and so she's supported at a district level many functions and has done them very well. We actually had a posting for supervisor of special ed, and I know that Ms. DePero kind of really wanted her to go that way. But when we had the posting for the high school AP, Michelle came and talked with me about her desire, first and foremost, to stay here in Lakeview. Her commitment and her desire to be here in the district and serving in the capacity that she thought that she could offer the most to folks. And she really felt that inclination to go back to the high school level, which is where her previous experience was before she joined us in Lakeview. She was a teacher leader, did technology, did special ed, has lots of high school experience and knows those kids at that level really well, is able to provide instructional support to teachers at the high school, and really wants to go back to the high school level, but more importantly, join our team and really complement what we already have that's happening that's really great there. And so we're thrilled that she went through the rigorous process. This is not an automatic assignment that sometimes people think just because you're an internal candidate, you slide right in jobs, and that's not how it works. She went through a rigorous process of interviewing. Last Wednesday evening, we sat here with a full team around this table and interviewed a number of candidates, very qualified candidates, and at the end of the process, Michelle went forward as one of our finalists, and Mr. Paulson and I interviewed her and definitely felt that she was our best fit for the position. And we look forward to everything she's going to bring to the high school and continue to do for our students and staff here in Lakeview. So congratulations. Michelle, you did bring guests, and you're welcome to introduce your guest.
I think I have to, because everybody probably wonders my team. This is my partner of 13 years, Johnny. He's my daily support team, as everyone in this room that knows me knows, in a job that is
Full-time.
These two wonderful people are my parents, who I probably shaved ages and ages when I was in high school, so the irony of that, of them being here as I'm getting to stand with you guys it's an honor for me to have them here. So thank you, everybody. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
We look forward to more great things coming out of the high school. Thank you. Any comments from the board? Nope. Okay, we move on. Item B, under personnel, exempt central office contract extra duty compensation recommendation.
In July of 2022, the Personnel Subcommittee authorized administration to audit exempt employee contracts with respect to salary and fringe benefits to determine how they compared with other district employee contracts, as well as comparable positions in districts throughout the state. Superintendent Paulson, Ms. Conan, and myself have engaged in this exercise over the last several months and presented preliminary findings to the Personnel Subcommittee on December 15th, 2022, at which time the Personnel Subcommittee supported administration bringing forward a recommendation for contract modifications that would align with other internal employee contracts and external comparable positions. The board approved a 3-tiered structure for various components of exempt employee compensation in January of 2023. One outstanding issue from the original project was related to current legal actions surfacing around the nation regarding exempt employees and excessive hours worked beyond his or her typical workday or week. The Personnel Subcommittee met on April 19th, 2023, to review a conceptual outline covering the topics before you tonight. One component of the proposal under consideration tonight is the idea of excessive hours on a given day or week. Administration has recommended a 3-tiered extra duty compensation structure to address a variety of scenarios for excessive hours worked. This part of the proposal can be implemented on an as-needed basis to protect the district from potential Fair Labor Standards Act violations. A second component considers employees who are motivated to earn additional certifications and/or credentials in their field. Typically, this would require unique, additional, and/or specialized training, which may occur during the workday, in the evenings, or on the weekends. Motivating employees to earn additional credentials or certifications in their field is beneficial to the district in that they can apply that knowledge to their work, which can improve district operations. In the event the employee earns the additional certificate or credential, administration recommends the attached table be utilized to provide an additional extra duty compensation. This compensation could be a one-time payment or an annual payment added to their pay if the certification or credential has a renewal structure which demands regular, ongoing training to keep the credential or certification. A third component related to extra duty compensation are 3 identified job tasks which have become necessary in the current operational environment. To address these 3 issues, administration projected the annual hours likely to accomplish the task and established 3 off-schedule extra duty payments that can be assigned to individual employees on an annual basis. These include 1, website and social media management, which is a daily task, 2, substitute staff management, also a daily task, and 3, network maintenance, which can be daily and weekly. The goal here is to have these tasks assigned as an extra duty job for current exempt employees as opposed to hiring additional staff or an outside vendor to accomplish these tasks. Administration recommends the board approve the central exempt extra duty compensation summary as presented.
Mr. President, I recommend that the Board of Education approve the central exempt extra duty compensation summary as presented.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Minor, support by Ms. Taylor. Discussion on the motion.
I just would like, maybe you could just give us an example of how this is used.
So there's 3 different components to it. So in the first component, Fair Standard Labor Acts protects exempt employees. So in what has been happening across the country, I'm not just saying here in our district, but folks who are exempt, people, organizations are working those people a ridiculous amount of hours and saying they're within their legal ability to do so, not paying any extra on overtime. And so the legal action has been out there that says, no, that's not possible. You have an exempt employee who has a standard typical work day, work week, and when they work outside of that, they're entitled for overtime pay, and you have to do those pay as well, or else they have the ability to go after the organization for that compensation. So we've established that when it's outside of those times beyond, and when we talk about an exempt employee, typical work week, 50 hours, right? So we're not saying that it's less, but in those times. So an example of that would be if the HR department, I'll use the HR department, we work lots of hours. We've been doing evening interviews because we're not pulling people out of their workday and the candidates out of their last week of school, and we're doing those, and we're our folks, our support staff down there is walking out at 7:30, 8 o'clock, and we're saying that's kind of typical part of the piece, and sometimes we can adjust and do comp time, but the other part is sometimes we can't do that. But if we're doing a Saturday job fair because we have all these openings and they're coming, work their full week, coming working a Saturday, putting an 8-10 hour day to do a job fair, that's outside of what the typical work would. And in that case, for that Saturday, they would be entitled to this extra compensation if we weren't able to comp them. But yet this time, it's all hands on deck, no one's taking off, right? So in those cases, that would be an example of that. The other certification piece is, additional certifications yield additional pay. And then the third component piece would be, these are tasks that we could hire other people to do that would cost additional money. It's more fiscally responsible for us to add it as a stipend. An example of that would be, our network goes down on a Saturday. Mark Mullins does not have the ability to tell me, well, peace out, Tracy, I'll, get to that when I come back on Monday. He and I are at 10:30 on a Saturday night figuring out how to get that network and everything back up. And so as part of that, that would be an example of that piece.
Thank you very much.
But at the same time, you may have a situation where it's firewall related or something to do with the core router that he may not be able to help you out with, so you still be caught in the pickle of having to bring in a vendor to bring that expertise in.
Correct. And in those cases, they wouldn't be here independently themselves. He would be on site with that vendor. So you're right, there are times that we would end up having to do that, but he would be here overseeing those vendors, even if it were a Saturday night at 10:30.
You would still get the compensation under this.
Correct, yeah, because he would physically need to be here overseeing that. We wouldn't just open the doors for FiberLink to come in and work in our closets without him.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, we're doing a contract extension later tonight.
Mm-hmm.
Why is this not added into your contract? Is this going to be a yearly thing we have to do, or why is this not in your negotiation package now?
Because these would be for additional hours worked, and what our contracts are is what our base is of what our typical work. Those are covering, we don't want to add that you're going to automatically be paying this if there aren't, and I'll go back to the example. On a year that we're not doing a job fair or some of the extra, we wouldn't have those extra hours, and we wouldn't be authorizing or paying additional. We'd just be paying the regular salary amount.
So the idea was this title means something of the document. There's going to be a line in any of the exempt contracts that would reference this document. So this document's going to be live too, as far as any wage enhancements and things of that nature that take place. The numbers are taken.
Contract's a contract. And to have it live is not, it's a piece, everything's within a piece of paper of a contract. If it's live, and I don't like that. So like, it should be, I'm just curious why it wasn't in the contract for renew. It's something that can be open, that's where I don't, like, no one else has that opportunity to have a live ad.
I think if the question is, why wouldn't we take all of this language and add it to everybody's?
Yes.
I guess that's possible. We're just going to add, 7 pages of narrative to, whatever it is, 14 contracts, to make them the same. By having you adopt this, we can reference it, as she noted, because we don't, in the exempt contracts, we don't define the whole benefit structure. We make reference to the principles language for the benefit structure, because it keeps those contracts, 12 pages instead of 30.
I understand where you're coming from. I don't see the teachers come across with, adding stuff like this ever. And we don't usually do contract negotiations for board meetings.
I would just add,
This is new.
the other contracts that you're referring to do have language in them for additional work and compensation that is attached to them. The teacher's contract has additional, the paras, the food service, it identifies the times that they're working outside of their set hours and what that pay would be within the contract.
That's more what I'm getting at. I read the
Yeah.
sentence within your contract.
Yeah.
Not yours personally, but as a whole.
Yeah. These will,
Opposed to an outside.
Yeah.
Outside approval by the board. That's my only 2 cents to it, but I don't know if I can swear.
I personally like the outside, because I think that that needs to be amended, we don't have to bring that contract in front of the board, we can bring the actual outside part and amend with that, and then we're not scratching the whole contract, we're just amending part of it.
I assume that somebody put pencil to paper to say, okay, this is what we're looking at roughly on an annual basis, what potential costs there could be for this.
I think that's the problem. It's, what we've tried to do is accommodate the variety of possibilities that can exist without having to write them all out. In other words, use this hourly structure or the daily rate for the extra time, if whatever that might be for. One of the examples that occurred this year, but we didn't need this because it was one of the master agreements and an hourly employee covering 2 jobs essentially. Well, that meant overtime, because that's very explicitly spelled out. But in the circumstance where one person is missing for several weeks and you can't sub that, the overtime concept would be some exempt employee covering for the other exempt employee who's missing. And then you still have a job to do. I mean, we don't have exempt employees that are, full-time and only working part-time. We've got everybody, pretty loaded up. So I think the idea for us was, the 3 of us at least, as we went through and tried to think about possible things that could come up that would affect and somehow be able to be implemented with respect to these structures, it allowed us to have that variety of things that could come and be, one time in 10 years. I don't think this is going to be a very frequently utilized tool, quite honestly. It's going to be when we have somebody out on a serious medical situation, or if we have to do something unique because of circumstances that are such that, a job fair or something of that sort. And that's not to say we would even implement this, because as Tracy said, if it's comp time, it might be different. If you're not hiring a ton of people all at the same time and you have these things come up, then you potentially could say, oh, within 2 weeks you can take a half a day off somewhere or a day off somewhere as a comp time replacement, because that is another alternative to this that's in the law.
The other part with labor laws is comp time can't be banked. It's supposed to be used within the period that of the time earned. And in the past, we were not, I'll tell you, not complying. We were letting people bank them because we didn't know, right? Now we know more and more in the training piece, so that comp time, it's not possible. And if you're not allowing them to take the comp time or paying them, then we can be legally on the hook.
But could they grieve it then to say, I don't want the comp time, I want the money instead? And you say, no, take the comp time. All of a sudden, you've got a conflict.
Yeah, I think these contracts, the law doesn't deal with a grievance procedure.
Right.
These contracts do not have a formal grievance procedure like your master agreements do for employees. There's a arbitration clause if there's a termination discussion and disagreement, but other than that, that's the only place where that factor comes into play. Good questions.
Thank you. Any other questions? Comments? Concerns? Okay. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? All right. Item C, proposed exempt central office contract extension.
Tonight, administration brings forward recommendation to extend the contracts of the exempt contracted staff of Lakeview Central Administrative employees through June 30, 2026. All of these employees have performed their duties successfully. Several of these employees have completed their probationary period and are eligible for extended contract consideration. Others have been under 3-year contracts for several cycles. Individual contracts that are extended by either 2 or 3 years will allow these exempt contracted staff, as indicated below, to be on the same expiration cycle. Executive administrators will present 1-year extensions to these contracted employees on an annual basis going forward. This recommendation includes the following positions with the following years: 2-year contract extensions extended through June 30, 2026. Deputy Superintendent Tracy Van Puren, Executive Director Sean Zaborowski, Kathy Conan, Network Supervisor Mark Mullins, Executive Assistant Lori Cherry, Food Service Coordinator Tammy Smith. 2-year contract extension extended through June 30, 2026 for part-time position Auditorium Manager Warren Wilson. and 3-year contract extension extended through June 30, 2026. Directors Devin DePero and Laura Woods, Executive Assistant Alyssa Calderon and Nathaniel Connor, Supervisor of Business Anthony Snezik, Supervisor of Preschool and Latchkey Services Jessica Panicella, Lead Interpreter and Coordinator Sandra Maloney, Technology Specialist Michael Roan, Accountant Laura Azzapardi.
Mr. President, I recommend that the board approve the extension of the exempt central office administrative employees contracts as presented. Support.
Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Taylor, support by Ms. Martin. Question. Weren't we typically adding 1 year on every year?
We were adding 1 year on, and people were all indifferent, so we had kind of the popcorn piece of different people coming up in different years, and for us to do contract maintenance and upkeep was very difficult with everybody in different places.
Okay.
So in the last several hires, which have been several of these folks, when we might have done a 1-year contract, instead we did 15 months
Okay.
to bring them
To
to a
bring
June
them in.
30 time window, all of them. That was the probationary sequence, if you will. Typically it'd be a year, but in some cases we had it longer just to make it hit the June 30 time window. So several of these employees were in that situation, and that's why we're able to, sort of cycle it back now. We, as some board members know from experience of the past, lots of times when we're in bargaining, mostly with the teacher group, we would avoid having extensions on central exempts until the bargaining was over, and so that also got us off kilter a little bit with timing. But that's the intent. Long-term would be, let's get this down, clean it up, have that annual come in the spring every year.
So does this mean to say a year from now we hire somebody and we give them a contract, they'll have a 2-year gig, that'll all be coterminous?
Every first-year person is a 1 year.
Okay.
And could, as Mr. Paulson said, be 15 months or 16 months. If they are hired after the start of that first year, then they go all the way till the next June 30, so.
It's kind of a new phenomenon where the state's retirement system, if you're a 12-month employee, you've essentially achieved a year's worth of service by March 30th. So
Okay.
a lot of the exempt
hours.
situations are, there's no benefit to me to work till June 30 because I'm at my maximum. Unless I go past June 30, I'm not going to get any more credit in terms of the MIPSR's retirement system structure, which is a little backwards in my opinion, but that's the reality of it because it's based on the number of hours of service you have in a year. And it's, roughly a 6.5 to 7 hour day is a year. We're credited 8 hours because we have by the system how we have to put it in. Full-time employee that's a, administrator is going on an 8-hour concept with MIPSR's. So you earn the 1,100 hours or 1,200 hours that they say is a credit for the year in as early as like March.
Okay.
That's part of what has caused some of these folks to retire. I mean, Debbie DePape retired, April 30th was her last day. Recently, Katie Newman retired. March 30 was her last, 31st was her last day. Because in the end, their start times were June, at the beginning of a school year, over 30 years ago. But the nature of the way it's calculated today for the MIPSR's, they're at a full credit of a year. Why am I going to work another 4 months or 3 months when I can retire and still have the full credit for the year? That's a little bit what's happened.
Okay, fair enough. Any other comments, questions? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Curriculum, item A, Lakeview High School Marching Band to New Life Band Camp.
The Lakeview High School Marching Band would like to travel to Rose City, Michigan for a band camp experience in August 2023. Students have attended New Life Band Camp in past summers and were very pleased with the professional music instruction they received in preparation for their fall competitive marching season. Students will have the opportunity to participate in intensive team-building experiences, as well as music and marching sessions. All transportation will be provided by Preferred Charter Services Bus Company. Students are responsible for the cost of the trip, which is $360 per person, and participated in various fundraisers throughout the current school year to help offset this cost. Marching Band Director Jody Thompson is the sponsor of this trip. Approximately 100 students will attend with Jody and 4 marching band assistants, in addition to 12 to 14 parent chaperones. They will depart from Lakeview High School on Sunday, August 13th, 2023, and will return on Saturday, August 19th, 2023.
Mr. President, I move that the Board of Education approve Lakeview High School Marching Band to travel to Rose City, Michigan to attend the New Life Band Camp on August 13th through the 19th, 2023.
Support.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Bear, support by Ms. Martin. Discussion on the motion. Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Item B, Latchkey PM fee increase recommendation.
Administration has continued to analyze the cost neutrality of our tuition, preschool, and childcare programs. Now that COVID grant funding is going to be exhausted, but employee and supply costs have risen significantly and for the long-term future, administration projects the childcare or latchkey program expenses to exceed revenue. In addition, changing to licensing rules and supervision requirements will add costs to the program based on current size, facilities, and supervision needs. Lakeview's leadership is also interested in improving the program activities while changes are happening under the new licensing and supervision rules. The new enrollment and scheduling process approved last year requires parents to commit to specific days and times of usage for a full semester, with an opportunity to make changes at the semester break. Families pay a flat rate fee structure per day if using the latchkey service in the morning and/or afternoon, a different fee for the morning and afternoon, no matter how many hours the child may be in latchkey in either session. Rates and fee structures continued to be compared throughout Macomb County for similar programs this year, both public and private. After reviewing expenses and revenue for the current school year and projecting expenses after employee raises, benefit costs, and supplies, administration believes a fee increase is needed. To minimize the impact on the partial usage morning users, the flat fee of $5 per session, 1 hour and 45 minutes, is recommended to stay in place with no change. The afternoon flat fee rate of $7 is recommended to increase to $9 for 3 hours. The required scheduling process would not change from last year. If a child utilizes the full 3 hours in the afternoon session, the cost would equate to $3 per hour. Most children utilize the afternoon session for between 1 and 2.5 hours. Administration recommends the increase to $9 per hour effective for the first day of school in 2023-24.
Mr. President, I move that the Board of Education approve the proposed fee change for the PM latchkey rate at a rate of $9 per session.
Support.
Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Taylor, support by Mr. Bear. Discussion on the motion.
How did our books fare out at the end of that? Was there
I'm sorry, I was involved in the process, but I'm not prepared to. I can get an answer for you.
were the books neutral? Were they ahead, behind? How did it?
This year we came out ahead because we had the child care stabilization grant to cover some of it. But with the rising cost, like they said, of the fees for the staff, next year we would be looking at.
By increasing?
If we did the increase.
If we did increase, it'd be neutral.
Any other comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Aye.
Okay, going on to business. Item A, 2022-2023 final budget resolutions.
All right, it's a long one again.
It's your turn.
Yeah, so, not as long as last week's. So this evening, administration recommends that the Board of Education consider the final General Fund, Capital Projects Fund, Food Service Fund, 2020 Bond Fund, 2022 Bond Fund budgets for the 2022-23 year. In the General Fund resolution, there is minimal change from the amended budget that was brought to the board in April 2023, but several line item adjustments between functions will be evident. Projected revenue and expenses of approximately $63.1 million and $62.6 million respectively are included to continue quality programs and additional initiatives for learning loss, social and emotional supports for students, enhanced safety initiatives, and one-on-one devices for students. The State General Fund and School Aid Fund have a significant surplus, so as a mechanism for the state to fund the retirement system, the district received approximately $2.7 million of one-time funding for the MIPSR's pension system, with offsetting expenditures the district pays back to the state. On the expense side, wage and benefit enhancements are included for settled contracts, as well as added positions such as behavior specialists, social workers, and other staff to support our students. In January, the district went to 3 medical plans instead of 4, with a significant migration of staff moving from other plans to the no payroll cost high deductible health savings account plan. Medical and RX costs are expected to decrease approximately $500,000 over the 21-22 school year. Use of the remaining federal child care stabilization grant funds covering much of the latchkey and preschool costs for the 22-23 year reduced the amount that the general fund had to cover of about $487,000. Remaining ARP IDEA, ESSER 3, and 11T funds covered some added staff costs for student supports, textbooks, and costs to enhance safety, which allowed the district to use those one-time funds to increase the transfer by $800,000 to the capital projects fund. This transfer can be used in the future to cover the expected increase in bond project cost or roof upgrades and technology projects. This, coupled with several expense line items for costs such as athletics, supplies, and other services that were not utilized, we expect growth to the fund balance. Administration expects to close the year with growth to fund balance of approximately $585,600, providing approximately $9.1 million going into the 23-24 school year. The Capital Projects Fund, as planned, is expected to have growth to fund balance for the 22-23 year as a result of the general fund transfer of $2 million that accommodated not only student technology for the one-at-one initiative and minimal repair at buildings and site improvement projects, but also added funds for future technology replacement and other expected projects not covered by bond funds. For the 22-23 year, we expect the Capital Projects Fund to close the year with approximately $2,454,029 in fund balance. The Food Service Fund, we expect to break even with expected revenues and expenditures of approximately $1.8 million. The district reverted to the traditional school lunch program for the 22-23 year, which did not include free meals for everyone. However, as a means to reduce the fund balance as required by federal rules, in January 2023, the district began covering the cost of families that qualified for reduced meals. On the expense side, increased labor and benefit costs of approximately $140,000 over the 21-22 year is a result of wage enhancements and full staffing. The budget also includes about $50,000 in supply and capital outlay expenditures to update aged kitchen supplies and equipment such as hot carts, cooling carts, and utensils. These will enhance the food service operation and also address the excess fund balance requirement for state and federal compliance. The supply chain assistance and local foods grant totaling about $165,000 covered costs of minimally processed local food that the food service program would otherwise have had to pay for, which helped to offset operating costs. Our food service program employees continue to work diligently to efficiently prepare and serve meals to our students. We anticipate the program will end the year with a slight planned decrease to fund balance of approximately $28,873, with expected fund balance of approximately $699,229 to close the 22-23 school year. Finally, the 2020 bond fund and the new 2022 bond fund include several projects that have taken place this year. Princeton, Ardmore are nearing completion, and Greenwood and Harmon projects are rapidly taking shape. The 2020 bond fund is closing out primarily Jefferson projects, and the fund is expected to have about $1.2 million remaining to cover additional bond projects. Expenses are expected to be approximately $1.2 million of our 2020 Bond Series 1 and $15.6 million of 2022 Bond Series 2. On the revenue side, we are seeing significantly increased interest revenue due to taking advantage of higher interest rates available, which will help fund future projects. We expect to close the year with $1.3 million and $20.6 million respectively in these bond funds, and have these available funds for remaining projects in Series 1 and Series 2. Improvements at Lakeview High School and elementary playgrounds come next. There has not been significant changes to the debt fund, the 2020 or the 2022 school bond debt funds, or the student school activity funds since the board approval on April 11th, 2023. Therefore, those budgets are not included this evening as an amendment is not needed. Therefore, administration recommends adoption of the 22-23 final budget appropriations resolutions to include the general fund, capital projects fund, food service, 2020 bond fund, and 2022 bond fund as presented.
Mr. President, I move that the Board of Education approve the 2022-23 final budget appropriations resolution as presented.
Support.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Bear, support by Ms. Martin. Discussion on the motion. Hearing none. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. President, seeing no more business before this board, I motion to adjourn.
Support.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Bear, support by Mr. Miners. Comments, one last comment. Well done this evening. There was a lot to say in a short period of time, so thank you for your efforts tonight. Any other comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. On to 23-24.